start because otherwise there'll be double sound.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay, hello everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Allah's Narrative. I'm your host, Masood Ahmed. We have Keysar Trad with us today, talking about Islamic priorities of the Muslim people. So basically, I'll kickstart um, introducing uh, the topic. Brother Kaiser Trad, welcome to the show. And uh, I've lived in Australia for 10 years. I've seen Muslims do lots of things. Muslims have mosques, organize mosque committees, they come up with a constitution, they provide visas to imams to bring them to Australia from foreign countries. The Turks have their imams from Turkey, the Indians have their imams from the madrasas in India, and the Arabs have their imams from the Arab world. And Muslims organize themselves into communities um, wherever they live in the cities in Australia. They form community organizations and basically provide platforms there for the youth, for social clubs, uh, doing all sorts of activities from sports to learning and camping and touring. And they have women's clubs organizing women's activities, and they have little kids clubs organizing kids activities, and they have Sunday schools where they teach them the Arabic language and the basics of the Deen. And besides that, they have Eid festivals. They put out grand scale celebrations and basically entertaining the Muslim community twice a year. And besides this, they venture out to um, find schools for Muslim kids, and they start recruiting teachers or Islamic teachers, basically, into Islamic schools, and do a great deal of work in organizing and setting up schools across Australia. And moving up, Muslims also have massive charity organizations, such as Islamic Relief or Human Appeal and Zakat foundations and stuff like that, where Muslims generously donate their donations and their qurbans and everything. And about this, we have Imams Councils, where Muslim community gives Imams the platform they deserve to navigate the community into the future. And we have an umbrella organization called AFIC, and we have a couple of media outlets in Australia. So, what is my question to Kaiser Trad is, what is more that Muslims need to be doing, or what is that thing that Muslims are not doing? So, what are your views about this Muslim position in Australia?
Uh, you have cited many of the achievements of the Australian Muslims. Um, Although Muslims from different nationalities might bring imams who speak their language, overall, most of the mosques are open to people of all backgrounds, and it tends to be a situation of the local demographics. For example, Lakemba Mosque, when I was on their committee, we had worshippers coming to the mosque from many different nationalities, even though it was run by the Lebanese Muslim Association. There was a lot of people there, large numbers, hundreds and hundreds of worshippers on Friday who were not Lebanese. And today, most of the people living close to the mosque in Lakemba are no longer from an Arab-speaking background. The changes in Lakemba is that you've got a lot of people from Bangladesh, from Myanmar, from actually mostly now from Bangladesh and Myanmar, and a lot less Arabic speaking Muslims than before. But what these places have done is that they have served a purpose, and they have been very useful in helping Muslims learn more about our religion. Um, Even though there was a period of time when the Friday sermons were all in Arabic with a very brief translation, still you felt the spirituality was there. And with respect to the Muslim schools, you mentioned that they bring Muslim teachers. Uh, Look, in the past, they had hardly any Muslim teachers. Over time, as more of our children took on education as a field of study, some of these children went into the education field and they became teachers. Um, but in my experience, these schools will just take the best teacher that's available, and uh, as long as the teacher respects the ethos of the school, it doesn't matter what their background is. Now, what more can we do? We've done all these things, and all we've seen over the last few decades is an increase in Islamophobia. We didn't see a decrease; we saw an increase, and we saw society allowing Islamophobes to be very, very vocal and to push a lot of boundaries. They pushed boundaries beyond the limits. And that resulted in a lot of pressure on Muslims. It resulted in attacks on Muslim women in particular because they're easy to identify as Muslims, and because, like it or not, the Islamophobes see them as a soft target. Now, in a sense, that has made our women strong, very strong, mashallah, in addressing these issues. But when you're a pregnant woman sitting there in a disadvantaged position, you see a person who's been riled up by what they see in the media coming to attack you and start punching you in a cafe, as happened in recent years, you know that Islamophobia is a danger to reckon with. What we have seen in recent years is also a rise in right-wing extremism. This rise in right-wing extremism did not happen in a vacuum. It's happened on our watch. We've seen it happen before our eyes. What are we doing as Muslims? So what do we need to do? And I think what we need to do is first and foremost focus on our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can't keep taking things for granted, keep saying that, yes, Islam is the best, it's the solution for humanity, and we don't implement its ethics in our lives. No, we have to implement its ethics in our lives. First, how did our Prophet ﷺ win over people and bring salvation to them? He won them over and brought salvation to them by being a living example of this message. If you are not able to live this message, then all you're saying to the observer is that this message is theoretical and that it is beyond the capacity of a human being to implement. Well, that's not true. It is not beyond the capacity of a human being to implement. And the evidence for that is seen in our Prophet ﷺ, and it's seen in most of his companions. It's seen in good Muslims throughout history, right to this very day. There are many Muslims around the world who live the message of Islam very, very faithfully. And you see how it brings them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't need to know every single one of these people, but you know there are Muslims that when you come into their presence, you feel far more spiritual. You feel that they remind you that you could have a greater position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you could be empowered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to get to that level, you have to go back to the basics. And when our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said or summed up his mission as to perfect human behavior or perfect the character traits, the way that people deal with each other, then you know that the key to starting all this is in perfecting your conduct, perfecting your values and ethics, in improving the way you interact with the world. There's a verse in the Quran that says just that. It says, "Oh, you who believe, alaykum anfusakum means start with yourselves. Your biggest responsibility is yourself." And then in that verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "La yadurrukum man dalla idha ihtadaytum." You will not be. It's no harm to you that some people are astray if you follow the guidance. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَى اللَّهِ مَرْجِعُكُمْ جَمِيعًا فَيُنَبِّئُكُم بِمَا كُنتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. To Allah is the return of you all, and He will show you what you did. You will see all the deeds that you've done. So, first step, we have to start implementing every aspect of this message in our lives. You
Okay,
cannot say
let
that
me
you're
just
good
pause you.
Muslim.
Let me just pause you there for convenience of understanding to flow between to the audience. You have given us a lot of content. You were pretty happy. If I would like to summarize what you had to say, you were pretty happy with the Muslim situation for their various achievements in Australia. But at some point in time, you shifted and became regretful and remorseful for how we are not matching the expectations of the Quran, if I can rightly capture your words. So, what I would like to ask you at this point in time in your thoughts is, what is the thing, according to you, that Muslims have not done which is dear to God? Just one thing, if you can elaborate on it.
Well, the one thing is the way we interact with other people. Like it's we all know that the media, which is dying in a sense, that the media focuses on the sensational and when Islam is an unknown, we have not done enough to spread awareness of our religion. We go around saying Islam is peace, but we can't control our children and stop them from going out protesting in the streets and holding some of the worst slogans that you could think of. Like, what impression do you give to people when we react in an irresponsible manner to provocation? You know, we do get provoked. Yes, you will get provoked. Muslims will get provoked. How do you respond to provocation? How did our Prophet ﷺ respond to provocation? If the provocation is words, you respond with words. If the provocation is physical, you defend yourself. If the provocation is intellectual, well, surely you have enough confidence in Islam to know that it can overcome any intellectual challenge. Of course, Islam can, but if you're not capable to deal with an intellectual challenge intellectually, then you're not the right person to address that challenge. Leave it to those who are able to address that challenge.
Let me bring you back to the question and the point of importance here, where I would like you to enumerate it, elaborate it. The one thing that you said we are not doing is projecting the ideals of Islam, the values of Islam enough. Is that what you mean? We are not doing it enough. Is that what you mean?
Well, look, by the values here, the most important value is that we behave like our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So it's
Where
behavior. It's behavior, is it?
it's
That you're
behavior.
focusing on?
Well, yes, that's right. It's basically our reaction. Our reaction is not the length of our bead.
No,
It's not
is it individual level? Is it like subjective, people to people connections, or are you talking about as a community? What are you specifically aiming at?
look, that's an interesting point that you raise. As a community, we're not a homogeneous community.
Hmm.
We are a collection of individuals, and these individuals, uh, many of them are exceptionally critical. Very few will actually come and support, but the bulk are very critical of anything and everything, and unfortunately, many of us are struggling to contain our egos, and we each one of us thinks that they can do the job better than everybody else, and when it comes to the crunch, and they start to try and do that job, and they start to fail, then they have to deal with the consequences. Now, how do you succeed in doing this job? Well, look, this job is not an easy job, and the key to success is, first you have to ask yourself a question. If I'm doing this for Allah, then I have to do it within the rules that Allah has given me. What are
Yeah.
these rules?
Can I stop you here, please? It will be interesting dialogue between us if you can confirm whether I'm syncing with your thoughts. I want to particularly pay attention to here the point that you're bringing up is, as a community, the behavioral expectations of Islam is not what we are matching as a as an Australian Muslim community. Am I right? Is that what your contention is?
Definitely, we are not matching the behavioral
Okay,
expectations.
okay. Now then exactly at this point, I have a question for you. So, which body within the Muslim community is responsible for this failure? Which body in specific is do you think is responsible for lacking this character?
That is a very good question, and the answer is probably something that people will not like. Even though, and I see this, I see many ordinary Muslims have improved tremendously, and I see in many of our children, I see qualities that are very, very admirable, mashallah. And I ask Allah to increase them and to help us improve further. But I can tell you, before we look at the bodies that represent Muslims, we have to look at ourselves. Are we taking the responsibility? Islam is a faith of accountability. Right
But
after,
we seem to be having leaders here who are responsible over the Muslim community.
they're not. No, but this is the point. They are not. These leaders might try to project themselves as responsible, but they are not. Firstly, hardly any of them has acted responsibly. In fact, most of them act as if they're competitors to each other. Where's the
Would you
Islamic
like would you
spirit?
like to identify them? Who are them?
No,
Who
no,
are
no.
these?
Look, I don't play the game of identification. I mean, they know who. If any of them hears this, they know who I mean. They all know who they are.
But how
And
would how would general common Muslims would know it?
and I will go a bit further. I'm
Mm.
yet to find that exceptional leader who has
Mm.
risen above this category of people. I am yet to find in Australia, in the Australian Muslim community, the exceptional leader who will rise above their ego and rise above this competitiveness, where instead of competing to cooperate for goodness, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us in the Quran, He says, "Ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa." Help each other on doing good things. Do not collude in transgression and in wrongdoing. But what we do, instead of ta'awun, instead of cooperation, we are competing to see who's going to gain favor with non-Muslims as the representative of Muslims in Australia. There is no single representative of Muslims in Australia, and it is unlikely that there will be a single representative of Muslims in Australia as long as we are so. Look, before we talk about unity of Muslims, our hearts are disunited, because to many Muslims, the primary the primary influence is the ego. Overcome that, suppress it, get to the point where you've got your nafs under control, and then you will start to think collectively. We talk like we do lip service to this idea of unity. And most of the leaders that we've seen over the course of, well, maybe the last 20 years or so, um, most of them, not all of them, there's some who've been good. I'm not going to name names, like I said. Most of them have not been able to recognize the how to unite, and the value of unity, and what it means. Like, you should not be you should not be looking for that position of leadership to prove yourself. You should be first and foremost cleansing your heart, and then making sure, like, we have the priorities wrong. Most of these people, their priority is the position of leadership. No, my priority is the pleasure of Allah. If Allah is not pleased with me, no leadership position is ever going to bring me closer to Him, regardless of what society thinks of me. Let me
I
see.
agree. I agree with you that we don't have to name people, but we can name a category that's responsible for the for for not res- take shouldering responsibility to deliver Muslims. So can that category be the imams that we have in Australia who are not
Look,
doing their job?
look, some of the imams are doing great work. Some of the new imams, the young imams, I'm seeing who are quite eloquent in English, they're doing a good job. But it's too early to tell, because the temptation will always be there. See what happens once a person starts to rise to a little bit of prominence. There will be a lot of people who will jump in and try to use them. They try to recruit them to do their bidding, and they do this by lavishing a lot of praise and flattery on them. And these young imams do not recognize it, because they're not experienced enough in life. They will not realize that this person is trying to use them. This person is laying all this praise and flattery on them so that he can take advantage and use them to do their end, because that person is not capable of going out there and doing what they want to do on their own. They have to use somebody else. So this is where some of the imams fall. What do they promise them? Like, what did the shaitan promise our father Adam when he was in Jannah? They go to them and they promise them the thing. First thing they promise them, oh, your message will reach a lot of people. I will help you. Oh, you're such a wonderful speaker. Oh, mashallah, your message is great. Only if people could benefit from it. So they start off by thinking that this is something that by listening to that person or working with that person, they're going to get this message of da'wah to a lot more people. Well, sorry, stop back, think. You are not the only imam out here. There are a lot of imams, and many of them perhaps are more knowledgeable than you, and you don't know the sincerity. Only Allah knows the sincerity. So when somebody comes to you from outside your group and wants to bring all these wonderful things and try to recruit you without recognizing that they're recruiting you, come back to your elders, to your scholars, and say, look, a brother came to me with this idea to do better da'wah. What do you think? And that's the first step, because there are a
But
lot
that
of
never
people.
happens. That never happens. I've been suffering
You know
myself.
why? You know why it doesn't happen? It doesn't happen. I'll tell you why it doesn't happen. Because, I mean, it does happen in limited instances, but where it doesn't happen, because the person who's being deceived, the imam who's being deceived, thinks that. Oh, look, I've had so many arguments. People don't respect my brilliance. They don't respect my genius. They don't respect my ideas. So maybe this person will give me that competitive edge so that all these people will start respecting me. Well, look, they're failing in not respecting you as a person who might have something to contribute, is their failing. Your relationship, you have to always remember, your relationship is with Allah. If you are serving Allah, do not listen to the whisperings. The person who's coming to you with these ideas might be well intended, but again, they're also susceptible to temptation. To fight
Okay.
that temptation, there's only
Okay. Now
one
let me
way.
ask you here. Let me ask you a very important question here. I mean, these are subjectivities. People talking about how they have to be sincere to God. It's very subjective, and we can listen to lectures all day long, and still, it would be a subjective experience on how people relate to their sincerity in serving the religion of God. So, what I'm asking you is very important here. How do you transition the subjectivity, the experience of sincerity to serve God's religion and make it into a formal system of processes to make it objective? How can you, I mean, have you thought of these tools of how to
Look,
transition the
yeah, look,
subjectivity or
this
the
is
subject of sincerity
yeah.
and make it objective and make it
Look,
work in the society?
this is the point. This is the whole point. But before I get into that answer, I have to clarify one thing for the audience or for the viewers. Number one, it is not correct to refer to Islam as a religion. Um, I prefer to use the term the faith of Islam instead of the religion of Islam, because the word religion itself carries a lot of baggage, and religion is associated with a church hierarchy and a structure which is really not there in Islam. Because in Islam, one of the most important concepts is that an ordinary person may well be closer to Allah than the biggest of imams. An ordinary person may be far more spiritual and far closer to Allah than uh, the people with all the pomp and ceremony and position, etc. So instead of using the word religion, I prefer to use the word the faith of Islam, because it just gives a different implication and connotation.
Yeah, if,
What
if you want to answer my question of what is the
what
tech
what yeah
technique
what
or
the
system, have
technique?
you thought about
Yeah,
it?
no, no. Look, the technique is it has to be slightly different for each person, but there are so many ahadith of our Prophet ﷺ to clarify these things. Number one, don't suspect the intentions of other imams. It's not your role. It's not your position to sit in judgment. So you want to test your sincerity? Test. Are you judgmental against other imams? Do you wish to overpower them and be supreme over them, or do you wish them the best? Imam Shafi'i, for example, used to say things along the line that I would love for the truth to manifest through the words of the person debating me or the person who's arguing with me. because then it's not about me. It's about the truth. It's not about my ego. It's not about where I will be. It's about the truth itself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who raises your position. And your position in this world means nothing. Your position, that means everything, is your position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're not going to be tested on how much money you amass and how much money is at your service. You're going to be tested on how well you use the resources that Allah has given you, including the faculty of intelligence, including all the faculties. And you know that. And all these imams, they know that. And they teach us this all the time. But they need to be seen to implement it. They need to be seen by ordinary people to implement this. I've seen some imams who really, really, mashallah, enviable in the way of their apparent sincerity, and leave the heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I support them. I would love to do as much as I can to help them. So it's not for me to judge the sincerity of others, but judge myself, judge my sincerity. How do I relate to other people? How do I feel about other people and their successes? Do I feel envious when I see a success of another imam, or do I wish him well in my heart? It doesn't matter the words that come out of your mouth. I mean, they matter if you're hurting people, of course, but in your heart, before your mouth speaks, how do you feel about that? I'm not interested in words that may or may not be lip service. I'm interested in your heart, for you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to test you. If you believe that Allah knows what's in your heart, then that's the first place you've got to cleanse.
Yeah, let me stop you again here. So the one thing that we are trying to focus on getting things right for the Muslim community is having the imams to be sincere and unite. Is that the first thing to build unity?
Look, Sheikh Muhammad, who happens to be my son, Sheikh Muhammad Trade, in a paper that he did.
Is he listening to us? Is he listening to us now?
I don't know who's listening to us now, but
Can he join us? Can he join us now?
I didn't. He's not
Okay.
next to me. I don't know. If he's listening, he can join. He wrote a paper about unity, and in that paper he says unity is an outcome. You might have all the intentions you want to be united. It's an outcome of where you are. Is your heart? Are our hearts united that we want Islam before our ego, before our nafs? And he cites a verse from the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is from the compassion of Allah that you became soft towards them. If you were, the key point, if you were to spend all the resources in this earth to bring the hearts of the Muslims together, you would not succeed. Allah
Yeah.
is the one who brings their hearts together. When does he bring their hearts together? When their purpose is the same, when everybody wants the word of Allah to be above their ego.
Okay, absolutely right. If in Sydney we set up a conference for this exact cause, and all of the imams or all of the leaders of the Muslim community, not necessarily they have to be imams, but all of the leaders, they come together for the cause of electing a leader for the Muslims of Sydney. What would you see yourself doing if you're one among the members in the conference? Like who would you elect? Do you have somebody on top of your mind that you would want to see as the Muslim community's leader in Sydney?
Let me put something to you that you might find ridiculous. One of the national bodies, one of them. The leader of that body recently wrote to all his members saying, what do you guys think if I continue without an election? And they did not run an election. Even though that person has finished his constitutional terms, only entitled 2 terms in his constitution. And it's not AFIC. I can tell you it's not AFIC, because AFIC had its election in October last year.
It's all right if it is Africa. I don't care.
But I don't care who it is. But I'm just saying, I do care. I do care because I was involved in AFIC. It's a different story.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, when you get to that point, instead of the members saying no, I mean, like, what sort of members do you have that they would see something so wrong and say and not do anything about it? Like our Prophet ﷺ said, if you see something wrong, change it. Change it with your hand or with your words or with you hate it in your heart. Uh, if many of these people just hate it in their hearts, I mean, look, where do we expect ourselves to be? I'm not
mm,
saying this person is not suitable or whatever. Who cares? What I care about is you establish a process that everyone's agreed on, and then
mm,
you throw that process aside because you've got the power right now to
mm,
basically and effectively and essentially step on everybody's head and say,
mm.
I am staying in power and there's nothing I mean, he didn't use those words, but what he did means I am staying in power and there's nothing you can do about it. That is horrific. That is
Yeah,
honestly
but
horrific.
you're not answering my question. I asked you a question, given the scenario that you're in Sydney in a conference where Muslims, all the leaders of the Muslim community in Sydney, have gathered together to elect a leader and become disciplined and become united under the leader. So, do you have somebody on top of your mind to make a move?
That's a very very difficult question. Firstly, number one, I don't know all the Muslims in Sydney. If I did, and to pick someone, I would have to read the resumes or the
Mm.
CVs or the biographies of all those who are interested.
So, when are we doing this job? When are we doing this?
It's not going to happen because
It's too
security.
late. It's already too late. When are we doing this?
No, no. It's never too late. Look, there was a period of time when Sheikh Hilali was the undisputed leader of Muslims in Australia.
Okay.
For a long period of time, he was the undisputed leader of Muslims in Australia. He did not occupy a position in the national bodies or in the. He was an imam at a mosque, and you could see that his message packed a lot of sincerity. It reached your heart. He spent a lot of time serving people. He would give up practically anything he had to help people who needed his help. He would go at any time of
Yeah,
any hour of the day or night.
that's besides the
Now,
point.
to
Yeah,
get to get someone
besides
who
the
will do
point.
that, and look, when he was scandalized by the Western media.
No, that's besides the point, brother Kaiser. I would like to ask another question here because we're missing the point. The point is, if you don't have anyone on top of your mind because you haven't looked at the resumes, would you nominate yourself to lead the Muslims in Sydney?
Look, let me tell you something about myself.
Mm.
Um, I am too straight for a lot of the people in leadership positions. Um, my experience with many of these people is that they want someone who plays politics. I don't play politics. I'm not the right person to.
But that's the sort of right person that the community needs for to succeed, isn't it?
Well, it's not for me to say. Look,
No, no, I'm asking. I'm just putting out. If
let's say let's
we
say
need straight people, we don't need diplomatic people who mess up
let me let
things.
me let me put it to you this way, brother Masood. If it wasn't me, if it was someone else with this quality, right? If you're talking not about me, but someone else with this quality, will
Okay,
that
me, for example, me. Okay,
whoever it doesn't matter who,
okay,
someone
right.
with this quality and the
Mm,
experience to show that they've taken a stand and they've always been they're doing their utmost for the community, etc. Uh, and not selling out on verses of the Quran like some imams did uh, a few years back. Um, the the these people cannot succeed on their own, no matter what. No matter what, they cannot succeed on their own because what will happen? Because they will need enough support behind them. Because there's a lot of people in the community who want a quick dollar, an easy way out. They've got a project and they think they're working for Allah, and someone comes and says, "If I had the resources of the Muslim community organizations, I will fund your project and make it a priority."
mm.
And then when they get into that position, I say, "Oh, look, sorry, the money's not all there. Here's a few bucks." Like I've seen
All
this,
right.
and
Mm,
I've lost elections to these types of people in the past, so,
mm,
because you need the rest of the. This is what I keep saying. Work.
mm,
If everybody worked on themselves, then Allah will help them get the right person.
mm,
This deceptions of the shaitan will not affect them anymore, not to
mm,
such an extent. So work on yourself, work on your heart, cleanse yourself, and then you will find that Allah will help you get the right person to be in the leadership position. Now, at the
mm,
moment, I can tell you many of the leaders hold on to these positions for one very, very, very stupid reason, a reason that distances them from Allah, not brings them closer to Him, and that is to show mainstream societies that they are powerful individuals, that they have influence. Like they're not looking to please, they think that they're pleasing Allah, but they're not. All they're doing is appeasing. And oddly enough, they are not as smart as the person they're trying to impress. The person they're trying to impress uses them. They use them. These politicians, they use them. And as soon as these people are no longer in a position of power, they will discard them. They will discard them like used nappies.
Got your point.
Unfortunately,
Got your point. Seeing the difficulties of the situation that unity is so close to impossible, what do you recommend? What is your recommendation? Before we get to this question, for you to answer this, we will take a short break in which we talk informally and for like a few minutes, and then you can answer this question, all right? So, two people are watching us on YouTube. This is a very important conversation, right? Two people are watching us, just two people, three people now. So, where are we failing? Why haven't we told? How do we get people to participate in what really bothers them, what really concerns them?
first, from my perspective, it doesn't matter how many people are watching now. What matters, and this is the nature of these types of conversations, what matters is if this content, if people think this content is valuable, we share the link afterwards. And if people like it, they will share it. If people like it, they will pass it on to their friends, and they will, and more people will view it, and then they'll decide later whether they watch live or not watch live. We're not in control of the different priorities that pop into our lives at different hours of the day and night. It's not like before when people just sit down in front of their TVs and they're glued from the time they finish their dinner till the time they go to sleep. It's not like that anymore. It's a time when now people watch when they have the time. They might be watching it during the day. They might be watching it as long as it's there for people to see.
Yeah.
And it's shared afterwards. So I'm not fussed at how many people watch it live. And in the end, like if we're doing this for Allah, it doesn't matter if it's one person watches it or
No, we have to be
or a million people
effective.
watch it.
We have to have effective uh, ways of doing things. Of if we are doing things for the sake of God, we have to make sure that we do the right things so that there's a wave created for the sake of God. So nothing else to that. So let's come back to the question. So seeing that unity among the imams is so far fetched, what do you recommend? What is the way that Muslims can resort to emulate or to bring about the change that they deserve? If it is not working, if it is not happening through the imams, so what other method do you reckon is available at the disposal of the Muslim community to act for them to bring the necessary changes that's so important to their existence and to their future?
I'll go back to the original message: fix yourself, and that's where you start.
What does it mean? It's a very subjective statement. Fix yourself. What does it mean in relation to bringing unity and leadership to the Muslim community? What do you mean when you say fix yourself?
Let's go back to the way our Prophet ﷺ did it. He was bringing the message to the believers. What leadership position did he enjoy, other than one who passes knowledge? Was it an enviable leadership position when he was in Mecca, when he was a target?
Like with Prophet Muhammad, it's very clear because he was the Prophet of God, so there was no question, there was no dispute. He was the leader, and it was fairly very simple, brother Keysar, very simple. But today, it's a very different situation, exactly opposite situation. When you have you don't have a centralized authority, you don't have an authority from God. You have lots of people who are leaders, who are educated, who may be having a lot of ilm and wisdom, or they might have had degrees and certificates and stuff like that. In this scenario, it's far more difficult. This scenario, the best analogy I can give you in the Quran is the Banu Israel at the time of Prophet Samuel, uh, when they were trying to figure out who is their leader to go and wage jihad, and God intervened. God intervened and said, "I will show you the signs of, the relics of Musa and Harun. When you see that sign, you should know that Talut is your leader." And no more arguments, no further arguments, case closed. So God intervened. But today, God will not intervene any longer. So our situation is like this Banu Israel, who are not able to elect a leader for themselves. This is
No,
our
look,
situation, not the situation of Prophet Muhammad in Makkah.
no,
It's a
no, no.
different
Look,
situation.
I totally disagree with you for one very, very important reason.
Sure.
Uh, the most important reason that I disagree with you on this analogy is
Mm.
that we have the Quran. Banu Israel did not have the Quran. We have
No,
the
they had the
Sunnah.
Torah. They have the
No,
Torah
no,
of
no.
Musa.
There's no comparison. There's no
Well,
comparison. I'll tell you why
like,
there's no comparison. No, no. I'll tell you. We agreed
mm,
at the start that you won't interrupt me when I answer, and I wasn't
go
interrupting you
ahead.
when you like what you said. I profoundly disagree with it, and I'm giving you now the explanation why I profoundly disagree with it. Um, the We have the Quran, which was the final message from Allah, the complete message from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. We have the Sunnah of our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We have the Hadith of our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We are not the rebellious community that was disobeying that while Musa alayhi salam went to the mount to get the tablets, they turned to the worship of the golden calf. Like Musa was just you've just been saved. You've just been saved from the Egyptians. You're just on the path. The prophet who was leading you to safety was with you, and just because you went away for a few days, you went to worship a statue that you made with your own hands. That's ridiculous. There's no comparison. We have the Quran. We have the Sunnah of our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was in Mecca in the early period, he didn't have the whole Quran. Now he was providing the wahi, the revelations to his followers, but he was in a very unenviable position. Even when he was in Medina and he was leading the community of the believers, he was still in an unenviable position because it was not a materially powerful community. That when the Confederates came to attack them, they were far outnumbered them. In the earlier battles, they were always outnumbered and materially in terms of weapons and material resources, they didn't have anything in comparison. So this leadership position that you talk about then was not an enviable position. Now, if we want to look at a leader in the world, I don't care about the leaders in Sydney or in Australia or in most of the countries. Why don't we go a little bit further and look at other leaders in the Muslim world whose work is commendable? Like, for example, look at the changes that President Erdogan has brought to Turkey. How he revived the country despite all the attacks from outside, despite all the efforts to undermine him from outside. There you have a Muslim leader that we can all relate to, and that
No,
we
let's
see hope
let's.
for the ummah.
It
Uh,
will make more meaning if we can restrict ourselves to our country, Australia,
but
because people in
no,
Australia can relate to what the
but
things that
people in
happen
Australia.
here.
Look, the second Muslim majority in Australia after the Lebanese is the Turkish community, and um, these people can relate to that in Australia. The difference between Australia and um, outside of Australia is that we've been, despite the Islamophobia and the rise of right wing extremism, Alhamdulillah, we've been fairly fortunate in this country. We have been fairly fortunate. We are not in France, and you know what's happening to the Muslims in France. But I go back to the point that I said before. I can see the comment on the screen, and I like this comment. You know why I
Mm.
like this comment? Because this comment actually gives you a fair comparison of many of the imams that we have. They are the priest class. We don't have a priest class in Islam. We don't
Mm.
have a clergy in Islam. We
But why
have
do we continue to have them? Anyway, why
what?
do we continue to have them
Ignorance.
anyway?
Yes, ignorance. Ignorance is what is why we continue to treat
Mm.
them differently
Is it
to this
ignorance?
day.
Is it ignorance of general public, general Muslims, or is it
That's
ignorance
right.
of
No, no, it's ignorance amongst
the
general Muslims.
management? No, common Muslims don't really bring these imams from overseas. They don't pay for their visas and everything. But the management of the mosque, they are the people who do this. So is it
No,
the
let me
ignorance of the management of the mosque, or is it the ignorance of the general Muslims?
no, let me put a point to you, and that'll
Mm,
clarify this issue.
mm,
Once an imam is brought to a mosque,
mm.
do you think it's easy to discipline? And that imam has been there for 6 months or 12 months, and they've started to get a following. Do you think it's easy to correct the path of that imam? Do you think it's easy? I've seen imams on national TV gather a crowd outside the mosque and go out and make all sorts of wild accusations against the committee of that mosque, and cause a lot of damage to that mosque. Now, this is one of the problems that we have as a community, is that because many of us at the grassroots level don't have a sufficient understanding of our religion, we don't know how to deal with imams. Compare that to the time of the Khulafa al-Rashidin, when a woman would stand up and say to the Khalifa, and he was leading the Jum'ah prayer and giving the sermon, that you are wrong. When a man would say to the Khalifa,
In the middle of the Jummah prayer. In the middle of the Jummah prayer.
if when a man would say to the Khalifa, if you do the wrong thing, I'm going to fix you with my sword.
Mm,
And the Khalifa said, there's no goodness in you if you don't say it. There's no
absolutely.
goodness, right? So
Mm,
I'm not saying that people should be that people these days should be disrespectful to the imams, because many of our grassroots are not at the level of those people who stood up and spoke to the imam, to the Khalifa, like that back then.
mm,
Those people were all companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they were almost, and very important point for the listeners, for the viewers, they were almost on the level of the Khalifa at that time. Now there's a huge gap between the knowledge of the ordinary Muslim and the Imam. And until we try to bridge that gap, close that gap, improve the knowledge of the ordinary Muslim, they are not going to be in a position where they can stand up and say, sorry, Imam, you're wrong. I know one case of a popular, reasonably popular Imam who comes to work maybe 2 or 3 hours a day and gets paid over $100,000 a year, and the
mm,
committee's too scared to say a word to him because they think they're worried about his following. Like,
mm,
what are you doing? Like, this imam, what are you doing? You're taking money for what? And on top of this salary, they get money from marriages, etc., from conducting weddings. Uh, you want to you're getting a double what normal ordinary imams get in other mosques. Earn it, work on it.
mm.
So work for it. Start putting some energy back into the community. Uh, and this is why I go back to some of the earlier imams that I worked with. They were different. They were different. Now, some started off as being good, close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then they tripped along the way and they failed, and power went to their head. I've seen that. I see it. And uh, alhamdulillah, I've been working with closely supporting imams for a very, very long time. And once power gets to their head, they won't listen to anyone. Why?
Mm.
Because the rest of the group doesn't muster the courage to stand up and speak and say, no, you're wrong. But all they do is they praise and flatter, thinking that, and like, where is our loyalty? Is it with our creator, or is it with our, this goes back, like I said before, the
Loud and clear. You said that loud and clear. Where is our loyalty? But it's loud and clear. So let me bring you back to the point that um, um, before I bring you back to the point, I would like to encourage the audience to share the link with their friends and family, have them join us live, and you can also join the conversation if you want to join through voice by clicking the pinned link in the chat box on YouTube. There's in the chat section. There's a link that's pinned post. You can click that, and we will let you in, and you can have a conversation with us. Okay, Brother Keysar, coming back to the point that you said you strongly disagreed with the analogy I provided, and I didn't see an answer come through. So, what is your disagreement? Why do you think the analogy was wrong?
Oh no, I explained because that was a community that
But
even
we
when the
find ourselves
prophet,
in the same situation, don't we?
no, we're not like Prophet Musa alayhi salam was away, but his brother Prophet Harun was right with them, and they still worshipped the calf, and they
No,
wouldn't
that's
listen.
after. No, that's after. That's what I said is the analogy that I gave you was during the prophet Samuel. The children of Israel, they were still wandering
That wasn't much
in the
after.
wilderness.
That wasn't
They
much
had no
after.
leader. They had no leader. They had to have a leader to go and battle out. So they disagreed as to who the leader was until Allah said, Talut is going to be your leader. If you disagree, I'm going to give you a sign, and that is, I will send malaks, the angels, who will carry the relics of Musa and Aaron. That'll be a sign for you to believe that Talut is your leader and you have to obey him. But
Yeah,
nothing of that sort is going to happen to us today. So we don't have a leader, but we find in a similar situation where we have a lot of infighting and we don't come together in a unity to elect one leader to govern us. So in that situation, isn't this the best analogy that I gave you? Do you still
no.
disagree?
Look, it's not at all because those people that you're talking about were the direct descendants of those people who worship the golden calf, not second generation, first generation descendants.
Yeah, but
And
it doesn't
and
matter. It doesn't really matter
and
because the analogy is
no,
a
it does matter
situation where you don't have a leader.
because I'll tell you because the first thing when their prophet said to them that Talut's going to be their leader, they said, "How can he have the kingship over us when he doesn't have wealth and is not from a like the story of Talut is an interesting story and has many other dimensions to it, which we don't have time to get into right now. But the point is, even when they accepted him, the first test about drinking from the river, many of them failed it. All the way up until to the fight, many of them were dropping out. We are not like that. We see now that our children unfortunately get misguided into going away to fight for cause for even if the people who are recruiting them are enemies of Islam and they don't even realize it, they won't even know it, they won't even, because they don't have enough knowledge. Our problem here is not is in lacking zeal. We have the zeal. Most of our children have the zeal, but we do not have enough knowledge. We need to make sure, but I think this is going to change with future generations. I think what I see today is there's a huge interest amongst Muslim children to go overseas and study, and the role of Imam in Australia is morphing. It's not the way it used to be before. In the past, you'd look very far and wide before you can get a learned Imam. Now there's many of them around, many learned Imams, and more are coming. More are studying and learning and coming, and the moment that the position of Imam changes from a position of leadership to a position of teaching, where they no longer see themselves as a leader, but more as a teacher, that's when you'll see a big change in the community, and the community will start to get ready to unite behind a leader.
Mm.
Historically, after the time of the Khulafa, the leader of the Muslims was not an imam. He may have been learned, he might have studied more than an imam, he might have had the best scholars, but he also dedicated a big part of his life to learn other things.
Mm.
One of the things that we have with many of our imams is that they don't have enough knowledge of the rest of the world. They get involved in politics, but they don't know enough about it. They get involved in so many other issues, and they don't know enough about them. Focus on what you know, teach what you know, and then you'll find a lot of the changes will happen in our community. Look, what I've seen, the things that people will go through to hold on to these empty, meaningless positions. Leadership is a big responsibility. A lot of people fight for these positions, and they stoop to despicable levels sometimes to get what? They don't understand they're going to be judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the first mistake they make is when they think that they're the only person for the job, that they're the most suitable person for the job, that they're better than everybody else. That's wrong. That is totally un-Islamic. Humble yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because your position in the akhirah is what matters, not your position in
This I
dunya.
told you, this is not going to work, because what we have had so far, that I mean, I'm 40 years old now. All my life I've been listening people speak in the mosques, in the masjids, to become sincere. So it's I've spent 40 years, I mean, okay, listening to people, um, making nasiha, admonishing people to become sincere. But it's only gotten worse. It's only gotten worse. So that's exactly why I asked you, do you have a technique to practically synthesize the theory and give a formula that the Muslim community can walk on to unite, rather than lectures of theoretical lectures of sincerity, purity, sidq, and all of that sort of things? Do we have a technique? Do Muslims have a technique, or do they even think of coming together and laying out a technique which Muslims communities can really follow stepwise in bringing about the changes that that they most deserve, and they prefer? You know what I mean? So this will be a topic for another time to talk, and it's it's almost 1 hour. I mean, I can go on if you would like to talk,
No,
but
no,
if you if
I'll just answer this question,
hmm,
and then maybe we can close it. Look,
uh,
um, this is different to any other type of work. If we were talking about ordinary mundane work, yes, 1 + 1 = 2. But in this type of work, the 1 + 1 is not in the material world. The 1 + 1, much of it is in the world of your own spirituality, how close you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the technique is focus on your salat, do extra salat, improve your connection with Allah, defeat the demands of your nafs, defeat the demands of your ego, guard yourself against the whisperings of the shaitan, and that is when, and improve your knowledge, and that is when you will get to a position where and I disagree. Things have not gotten worse. I see things have gotten a lot better in many regards. The only thing that's gotten worse is that, or that gives the impression of things getting worse, is when the spotlight is shone on things that are bad in the community. The spotlight didn't see them before because we were too small and insignificant. Now the spotlight, when the spotlight is being held by people other than us, of course, it's going to show the failings. But the success is far better than the failing. And with time, inshallah, you will see that many people will throw away that yoke that is holding them, the yoke of ignorance, and the yoke of following the wrong person. So test them, like make sure that their words match their actions before you decide that you're going to believe every word that comes out of their mouth.
do you want to take up this question?
What's the
Abera
question?
Hagos has got a comment. We don't lack passion, but we lack proper directions. In other words, our imams are not proper and fit to lead our communities, especially in the West. What do you have to say?
Why do we look for them to lead the community? Their
I mean,
job is to
wallahi,
teach.
what are you talking, Brother Keysar? We have imams for a reason, right?
Yeah, the
And then you're
imams are
coming and
there to
telling me,
teach
why
us.
do we look up to them? What is the point?
No, we look to them to teach us how to fulfill our rituals correctly.
Shouldn't
That's what
shouldn't
we
they
should be
also
looking to
teach
them
us
to
how to
do.
elect a leader? Is it not their responsibility?
No, it's not their response
Oh, why are they
because they
being
have
paid then
failed.
so
I
much?
tell you,
To
they
teach
have
Alif
failed.
Bata?
Look, let me tell you, they have failed in this consistently. Every time I've seen a committee of imams, every
Hmm.
time I've seen my personal experience, every time I've seen a committee of imams choose leaders for community organizations, I've seen them fail. Every time I've seen a committee of
No, if
imams,
if the imams cannot do basics, then why do we pay them so much in our masajids?
no, their basics is not to choose leaders. Their basics is to teach people and wish the best for everybody. The job of an imam is like
So
Sheikh
isn't
Hillel used
isn't
to say.
isn't 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 having a leader. It's the hadith of Rasulullah. Rasulullah said, even if you're three, elect one to be the leader.
Fine.
That's
Elect
how
them
much.
to be
That's how
leader.
much importance he placed on
Fine, fine.
leadership.
That's fine. That's
Okay,
fine. But
so
your
this is a
leader will listen
hadith.
to you.
No, let me speak. This is a hadith. It's part of the teachings. It's part of the Islamic teachings, and there's an ayat in the Quran. Ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasula wa ulul amri minkum. These are. It's in the Quran. It's in the hadith. So you are somehow giving a pass ticket, a chit, clean ticket to the scholars that they don't have the responsibility to teach the Muslim community how to elect any leader.
They don't have
I
the
mean,
ability. No, sorry, they don't have the ability.
that's what you have to
I mean,
say. That's what you have to say, and
some of them, some of
that's
them. Look, some of them.
concomitant. That's concomitant to the comment here, and the commenter Abira Hagos exactly makes the point that they are incapable, and this you confirm, but initially you did not confirm.
No, no, no. You missed my point. There's some
Mm,
of them who are really, really good, but the moment they get involved in selecting leaders is the moment that they've departed from their role as imam. Their role as imam is spiritual healers for the community, people
mm,
who help you fix yourself, fix your life, fix your relationship with Allah. They should
mm.
not take sides in saying, "Oh no, I want the community to elect this person as a leader." This is they're not capable at the moment. They've chosen, like, except in very, very few cases, many of them have made decisions with terrible consequences for the community. Terrible, terrible consequences. I've seen them so many times, like where they go in there and they're backing one person, they go around, and then all of a sudden, after this person gets into power, they turn on him because they've realized they've backed the wrong horse. Now, maybe it's just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Let the community, the teach, empower people, tell people that this is your responsibility. Don't put that burden on my shoulders. If I'm your imam, if you really care for me,
So why don't they do that?
your
Why don't they do
responsibility.
that? I've never heard an imam
And
speak like that. Why
because
why don't they do that?
we go back to a point I said earlier, that
Mm,
they feel they've been given power and
mm,
they don't want to let go of it. And then when they appoint a person in that, except for very few, when they
mm,
appoint a person or support a person to be in that leadership position, they come to collect later, and then they find that person is not delivering.
mm.
That person's not delivering because either they were incapable or they
So
lied their way into the position. Or and then what do these imams do? Oh, we backed the wrong horse. Now we're going to sit there and what are we going to? No, empower the community. Say to the community, take up your responsibility. I'm not going to take that responsibility off you. If you're a member of this Muslim organization, do your homework and uh, elect. Put your vote to proper use and elect the right person. I am not, as an imam, I'm not going to take that responsibility off your shoulders. Wake up and do your work. Do
mm.
your work and stop shirking that responsibility. The Muslims have to stop shirking that responsibility. When we see the example of the leaders electing, and I use the term leaders here in a different meaning to what you're thinking, where when the leaders were electing the Khalifa. The Arabic term for them is not leaders as such, but it's the people who had influence. You can say the influencers, in a sense, were electing the Khalifa in the early days. Um, those people were respected because they were people who were trying to help everybody. And when they were electing, they were not there thinking, "What am I going to collect from that person?" No. Today, we are not. I mean, when I say we, I mean the community collectively. We are not empowering the ordinary Muslims to feel confident to take up the responsibility of having a say in their organizations. I've got one organization, and I won't name, like I said, I don't do naming, that says we've got we represent 60,000 people in Australia. And then you ask them, how many people actually come and vote at your elections? How many people? Is it two or three people with fake proxies for the 300 or 400 financial members that you have? And then you say you represent 60,000 people? Who are you lying to, because people feel disempowered. And until everybody starts to take responsibility, you say, I have to take this responsibility, not so I can be elected, no, but I want to keep everybody in an elected position. I want to keep them honest. I want to make sure that they do the job and that they realize if they don't do the job, I am going to question them on this. And when they start to get questioned on this, then you start to filter the good from the person who is not capable of doing their work. So to get to that level, this is look. I've been in different leadership positions in here for a long time. I have never built an empire because I work hard on getting the people to start thinking that they're capable of taking the responsibility, of making a choice, of making a decision. Use your conscience and take your responsibility. Your role as an ordinary, you think yourself an ordinary Muslim, you're going to be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you want to live a life like cattle who just get up in the morning, graze or feed, work, whatever, raise a family, and then go to sleep, and that's the end of it? That's not our role in this world. We have a role to be saviors of humanity. Every single one of us has a role to go out there and be an ambassador of this great faith. We have a role to make ourselves accountable before we start to question others, before we go and criticize people outside our community. Make ourselves accountable first. Speak up.
Absolutely. That's a very, very, very strong point. So be critical of yourself. I mean, there's no. I mean, you won't achieve nothing by pointing fingers at non-Muslims. As Muslims, Allah has given us responsibilities, and they are clearly outlined in the Quran. And if we cannot even behave like creatures of God, like ants and bees and antelope and dogs, they have leaders too. Even the wild dogs have a leader. So how come Muslims who submit their will to God endure a long period of time without having a leader? That's unconscionable. I mean,
We have
it's
a lot
you
of
cannot
leaders. No, no, we
comprehend
don't
it.
have. We have a lot of leaders. We have a lot of leaders, and they will
Like
fight
one,
for
like the
dominance.
discipline of having one. What I'm saying is the discipline of having one. Even the
That's very
dogs
true.
have it. Even the dogs have it. By
Yeah, but
Allah, even the dogs have it. In the
we
makhluk of Allah, the
we
wild
we
dogs have the leader, alpha male.
yeah, we
We
use a
as
different test.
Muslims, we as Muslims, we don't have one leader, and we suffer badly, and we take no action. And this is very
The,
sad.
we've got at the moment there's two leaders on an international level and that you can look up to. One of them just won an election, like I mentioned before, and one of them is at the moment he's got some political turmoil, but we need to support him. There's a potentially a
We will
third one.
no, we will talk about Australia. We will talk about
No,
Australia.
you can't. You're not in a vacuum. Look,
Mm.
you've got to understand that the Muslims are. We're all supposed to be one body. And uh, look, if we want to talk about scholars, for example, you spoke about imams, etc., a few times. Um, we don't need an imam in Australia to be our spiritual leader. We can, uh, and I'm not saying that this person should be, but when this particular imam comes to Australia, thousands and thousands of people, in any city he goes, they flock to see him and hear him. Um, and there are bigger scholars out there that we can look up to. And our best scholars out there are languishing in prisons, in the prisons of the dictators in Muslim countries. Our best scholars, some of our most sincere scholars, are languishing in prisons. Um, and what are we doing about it? What is any of us? What representation does any of us dare to do to speak up for them? But
At the moment, we are asking questions. So there's another question from
no,
Abira
no, no. It's
Hagos.
a question. It's a rhetorical question.
Mm.
The thing that we need to recognize is that um, we each and every one of us has a responsibility. When we compare ourselves to some of the other communities, most other migrant communities, they have another country that will stand up for them. They will have um, a country that will contact the Australian government and says, "What's happening to my expatriates?" When it comes to Muslims, name one country that will stand for Muslims in Australia. Name me one country that will stand for Muslims in Australia. they might applaud oppression of Muslims. There were some majority Muslim countries who were financing the right-wing French politicians against the Muslim community.
Hmm.
So uh, this is a position this is a very weak position that we have at the moment that we need to think about. Now, is Islam going to shine from Australia when we're such a small minority? When Australia itself, as a whole nation, is following the politics of bigger powers? There's a number of reality checks. So this is why I go back. The best thing you can do as a Muslim in Australia is focus on cleansing your heart and bringing yourself closer to Allah. And once you do that, everything else will start to fall into place. Everything else will start to fall into place because Allah is not going to forsake the sincere Muslim who really wants to devote themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Well, thank you so much. I'll call it a day, brother Kaiser, and we would like to take questions if our viewers want to join in through their voice. All they have to do is click the link that's in the pinned post on the chat on YouTube, and we can let you in. You can have a question with your voice. So we will wait for a couple of minutes, during which time I'll just show you some of the books that I've written, which which may be handy if you want to grab a read. And so this is one of the books that I wrote some 5 years ago after discourses with the atheistic community here in Adelaide. So the outcome of those debates was I was pushed and cornered to defend faith if it made sense at all, and I was questioned, if this God of yours created all the cosmos, it's a huge cosmos, why wouldn't he tell us something about how he created it? If he wants us to believe in him, why wouldn't he tell us something about it? But then I told him, yes, he has. But then I was asked for the evidence of it, and for that purpose, I sat down and wrote this book. I've got a few other books here. My second book that I wrote is a book on creation of Earth and origins of life. And my third book is Sharia for Australians. So if you want to look into these sort of books for a read.
Well, what's wrong? Tell me. No, I'm listening.
And thank you very much for joining us today. And
I'll call you back when I finish.
we will. You can follow Allah's Narrative on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell button. You get notified when we are live, and you can even check the live section and check the future broadcasts. By that way, you can get notified of the future videos. We are indeed planning to have more of Brother Keysar and discuss on various topics. You can even suggest what are the topics that we should talk on this show. Certainly, you can also join us in the live conversations. You can join in, have a chat with us. All that will be good. And there's Muhammad Yusuf telling us Jazakallah khair for the session. Okay, he's actually my cousin from India. Okay, he's not even an Aussie. He's a cousin from India. Anyway, okay. So thank you, Brother Keysar, and I will end this live broadcast on YouTube, and you can hang on there and we can continue to talk for 5 more minutes. So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.